In this video, we're going to create several tables. The first one is a pivot table, and it basically has the frequencies of people who are hired and Hispanic, not hired and Hispanic, not hired and not Hispanic, hired and not Hispanic, total Hispanic, total not Hispanic, total hired, total not hired, and then total and the sample. And we're going to use this data to create a joint probability table, conditional probability tables, and even more conditional probabilities, and then answer some questions. The data here is at the bottom of the page. I'm going to go ahead and highlight all the data, and I'll copy and paste it into Excel. And then I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the first three rows here so that we have applicant number, status, hired or not hired, and ethnicity. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just highlight the data, not the columns, just the data. And I'm going to have to maximize this out a little bit because I'm going to convert it into a table. Convert this into a table. So I'm going to go to Home, Format as Table, and I'll just pick one of these. That one looks good. The reason why I did that is because it makes doing the pivot table real easy. Okay, so if I click out here, I lose a tab here. If I click here, I have this Table Tools Design. So I'm going to click on the Design tab here. I'm going to go over here and click on Summarize with Pivot Tables. And that's fine. I'm going to keep it in the existing worksheet, and then I'm going to hit OK. Whoop, sorry. I need to click here and then maybe click right there. I'm going to put the pivot table right here. I'm going to hit OK. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my Open Math real quick, and I'm going to look at how the table here is constructed. I got hired, not hired, applicant, and Hispanic and not Hispanic. So ethnicity goes in the rows and status goes in the columns. So clicking right here, I can see that I got applicant, status, and ethnicity. I'm going to drag ethnicity into the rows. I'm going to drag status into the columns. And then I can drag applicant here, but because applicant is a number, the default is when this is a number to sum. So I'm going to go ahead and just unclick that, and I'll just drag status into here. And because status is a categorical variable or qualitative variable, the default is count. Now I could have dragged ethnicity in here and I get the same thing. So because status and ethnicity are categorical variables, the default here is count. Okay, so I got hired, not hired, Hispanic, not Hispanic. And so now I can use this information to fill out my table. So I got 13 people who are hired and Hispanic. I got 16 people who are hired and not Hispanic. 46 people not hired and Hispanic. 29 people not hired and not Hispanic. Now the total of 13 and 59, or 13 and 46 is 59. The total of 16 and 29 is 45. So that means there were 59 Hispanic applicants and 45 non-Hispanic applicants out of a total of 104. These two numbers add up to 104. Now total hired is 29, 13 and 16. Total not hired is 46 plus 29, which is 75. And 75 plus 29 is 104. Okay, now I want to turn this these frequencies into relative frequencies by doing a joint probability table down here. So what I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and copy and then paste special the values here. Okay. I'll get rid of the word grand, and then I'll left justify that. Okay. So this table here is identical to that table up there. It makes it easier. So I'll copy and I'll paste down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these numbers here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the probability of being Hispanic and hired. The probability of Hispanic and hired equals the number of people who are Hispanic and hired divided by the number of people, number of applicants. I'm going to hit F4 here. Because this value, right, this probability of hired and Hispanic is 13 divided by 104. If I pull this over here, I get there are 46 people who are Hispanic and not hired, and there are 104 applicants altogether. These are called joint probabilities. And then I can drag this down here like this. I'm going to change it to 4 decimal places. And so this right here is the probability of hired and not Hispanic divided by the total of applicants. And this right here is the number of not hired and not Hispanic, 29, divided by the number of applicants. And again, these 4 things are joint probabilities. The total here is just that plus that. So this number here is the probability that a randomly chosen person, a randomly chosen applicant is Hispanic. I can either get it by summing those two, or I can get it by doing what? Dividing this 59 by the 104. So 59 people, 59 applicants for Hispanic, and there are 104 total applicants. So again, I can just add these two together, or I can just drag this down, and I get 45 divided by 104. 45 is the number of non-Hispanics that were applicants, and 104 is the number of applicants. And these two things are called marginal probabilities because they're on the margin of this table. Now, for hired, I can just add these two together, and I get the probability of hired. Or I can drag this down, and I calculate it as 29 people were hired, 29 applicants were hired, and there are 104 applicants. So the probability of a randomly chosen applicant being hired is 20.2788. And then for not hired, I take the number of people not hired, number of applicants not hired, divided by the number of applicants. And then this right here is a sum of this frequency table, which is 1, the sum of this frequency table, which is 1, or the sum of this frequency table, which is 1. Or I can just pull this down. I'm dividing 104 by itself. But again, this is equal to 1. This is equal to 1. And this is equal to 1. So this right here is the sum of these 4. This right here is the sum of these 2. It's also the sum of these 4. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my Alpha Math and copy these numbers in. So let me get this in here. Okay. So the probability of hired and Hispanic is 0.1250. The probability of Hispanic and not hired is 0.4423. The probability that the applicant was Hispanic is 0.5673. The probability of hired and not Hispanic is 0.1538. The probability of not hired and not Hispanic is 0.2788. The probability of an applicant being non-Hispanic is 0.4327. The probability of a randomly chosen applicant is hired is 0.2788. The probability that a randomly chosen applicant is not hired is 0.7212, and then we got 1.000. 0. Let's just find out if we got everything right so far before we move on. And it looks good. We're all good here, right? Now we're going to do conditional probabilities. So to do the conditional probabilities, I'm going to go ahead and copy this without the fourth row. It's right here. And I'm going to delete the numbers here. So what we're doing here is we're going to ignore. So this right here is the probability of an applicant being hired given they're Hispanic. So what we're doing here is we're basically only looking at this data here. So I'm going to highlight this in yellow. So given that you're Hispanic, and there's 59 Hispanics total, what's the probability of being hired? So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the 13 hired Hispanics, and we're going to divide that by the number of Hispanics. So this is the conditional probability of a Hispanic being hired. And then if I freeze F15, I'm going to freeze only column H. So I'm going to hit F4 once, twice, 3 times. And this freezes column H. It's pretty cool. When I drag this across, what do I get? I get 46 divided by 59. So of the 59 Hispanics, 46 were not hired. So the probability of a Hispanic being hired, of an applicant being hired given they're Hispanic, is 0.7797. Now, if I add these two up, I get 1. Okay. So if I drag this down, it's kind of cool. I look at this. I got 16 non-Hispanics hired, and there were 45 non-Hispanics. So what this is down here is it's the probability that an applicant was hired given they're not Hispanic. This right here is the probability that an applicant was not hired given they were not Hispanic. And again, these add up to 1. So now I can type these in here. Whoops, let me move this over here so I can get these numbers. So the probability of an applicant being hired given they're Hispanic is 0.2203. The probability an applicant is not hired given they're Hispanic is 0.7797. And then this total is 1.000. Okay. Now, the probability an applicant is hired given they're not Hispanic is 0.3556. The probability an applicant is not hired given they're not Hispanic is 0.6444. And those two add up to 1. And we'll just hit enter to see if we got it right. Okay, moving on. Now we're going to do different set of conditional probabilities. Notice there's no total column out here, but there is a fourth row down here for total. So I'm going to do with this is I'm going to copy these 3 columns and those 4 rows. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete these values. Okay. Now we're going to do this. I'm going to get rid of the highlighting here. And now we're going to say, hey, given that you're hired, all the not hired people are out of the room. The only people left in the room are the hired people. We're going to ask the question, what's the probability of being Hispanic given you're hired? So we're going to take the number of Hispanics that are hired. We're going to divide that by the number of people hired. So we're only looking at the people who are hired. Hispanic, not Hispanic. And of the people that are hired, 29, 13 are Hispanic. Now I'm going to hit F4 once, twice. And this is going to freeze this red box in row 17. So when I pull it down, I'm getting the probability of being not Hispanic given you're hired. And these two add up to 1. All right. Now I can pull this across and grab the bottom corner and pull it across. Now, if I click on this, what does that give me? Of the 75 people not hired, 46 were Hispanic. So 46 divided by 75 is the probability of being Hispanic given the applicant was not hired. This right here is the probability of the applicant being non-Hispanic. Sorry, the probability the applicant is non-Hispanic given that applicant was not hired. And again, these add up to 1. So let me set this aside and go over here. Whoops. To the side. So the probability the applicant was Hispanic given they're hired is 0.4483. The probability the applicant was Hispanic given not hired is 0.6133. The probability the applicant was not Hispanic given they are hired is 0.5517. The probability the applicant was Hispanic given they're not hired is 0.3867. And then the sums are 1.000. And then we'll see if we got them right. And we got everything right. Now, down here, we're going to answer this question using the tables we just completed. The probability of a randomly chosen applicant being hired is what? Right there. That's the probability that a randomly chosen applicant is hired. And means joint probability. So the probability of a randomly chosen applicant being hired and Hispanic is that value. Down here, the probability of a randomly chosen applicant being hired given he or she is Hispanic. So given he or she is Hispanic, we're in this row here, the probability of that person being hired is 0.2243. Now, if these two values are different, then we have dependence. If the probability of being hired is different than the probability of an applicant being hired given he or she is Hispanic, if these two probabilities are different, then being hired and Hispanic are dependent variables or dependent events. We hit enter and we get it right. So we're done. Thank you for watching.